The lake house had always been my sanctuary. 40 years of summer barbecues, Christmas mornings, and quiet Sunday afternoons watching the water. When I pulled into the gravel driveway that Thursday afternoon in April, I noticed the silver BMW parked near the side entrance. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't recognize it. My husband Robert had passed 3 years ago. Since then, I kept track of every single visitor to this property. I knew every neighbor's vehicle within a 10-mile radius. This BMW complete stranger. I'd driven up from Cincinnati to meet with Tom Mitchell, the contractor, about replacing the dock. The wooden planks were rotting, and I wanted the work done before spring fishing season. Tom was supposed to meet me at 2 p.m. It was 1:45. I was early. I should have called first. Looking back, maybe that would have changed everything. Or maybe not. I parked my truck behind the BMW and stepped out. The April air was crisp, carrying the smell of pine and thawing earth. Birds were singing somewhere in the trees behind the house. Everything seemed peaceful. Normal. I had no idea my life was about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. As I walked toward the front door, fishing my keys from my purse, I heard something. Laughter. A woman's laughter followed by a deeper voice. Male. The sounds were coming from inside my house. I stopped walking. My hand froze halfway to the doorknob. I stood there on my own front porch, suddenly feeling like an intruder, like I didn't belong here. Then I recognized the laugh. It was a laugh I'd heard hundreds of times over the past 8 years. At family dinners when David told his terrible jokes. At Christmas when the kids opened their presents. At Emma's school play last month when she forgot her lines and made up her own. It was my daughter-in-law, Sandra. My son David and Sandra had been married for 8 years. They had 2 children together, my grandchildren. Emma was 6 with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. Michael was 4, all energy and chocolate-covered smiles. David worked as a software engineer at a company in Columbus. He traveled frequently for work. In fact, I knew for certain he was in Seattle this week for a conference. He'd called me just 2 days ago to tell me about his presentation. So what was Sandra doing at my lake house with a man who wasn't my son? I stood frozen on the walkway trying to process what I was hearing. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was the television. Maybe she'd brought the kids up here for some reason, though I couldn't imagine why she'd do that without telling me. This was still my property after all. My hands were shaking as I moved quietly to the side window. What I saw made my stomach drop. Sandra was sitting on my couch, Robert's couch, where he used to read mystery novels on summer evenings, and she wasn't alone. A man I'd never seen before sat next to her. Too close. His arm draped around her shoulders like it belonged there. As I watched, barely breathing, he leaned in and kissed her neck. She tilted her head back and laughed again. That same laugh I'd heard from outside. I felt physically sick. This was the woman my son loved, the mother of my grandchildren, the woman who called me Mom Jessica and hugged me every time we said goodbye. And she was here in Robert's house with another man. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just stood there watching through the window like some kind of voyeur in my own life. My chest felt tight. My vision blurred at the edges. The man said something I couldn't hear, and Sandra laughed again. She reached up and touched his face with such familiarity, such intimacy. This wasn't their first time together. I knew that immediately, the way you know things in your bones. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. It was Tom Mitchell letting me know he was running about 15 minutes late. I stared at the text message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. But I couldn't respond. I couldn't do anything except stand there with my whole world crumbling around me. I had a choice to make. I could confront them right now. I could burst through that door and demand an explanation. I could scream, yell, throw this man out of my house. That's what every fiber of my being was screaming at me to do. That's what any mother would want to do. But I'm 63 years old. I spent 40 years as a corporate attorney before I retired. I've seen enough situations in my career to know that acting on pure emotion rarely leads to good outcomes. Evidence matters. Documentation matters. Timing matters. I stepped back from the window, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked quietly back to my truck, my legs shaking beneath me. I got in, started the engine, and drove back down the road about a quarter mile. There's a small turnout there hidden from the lake house by trees. Robert and I used to park there sometimes years ago when we wanted to walk the old forest trail. I pulled in and sat there for 10 minutes, just breathing, just thinking. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. 40 years of legal experience had taught me one crucial lesson: if you want to win a case, you need ironclad evidence. You need facts. You need proof that can't be disputed or explained away. Right now, I had my word against Sandra's. If I confronted her without proof, she could deny everything. She could spin some story. David might even take her side, angry at me for spying on his wife. No, I needed to do this right. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out the small digital camera I kept there. Old habit from my legal career: always document everything. Property damage insurance claims, contract disputes. I'd photographed more parking lot fender benders than I could count. Never thought I'd use it for this. I got out of the truck and made my way back toward the lake house, but this time I went through the woods. There's an old walking path that Robert and I used to take every morning when we stayed up here. It winds through the pine trees and comes out near the storage shed behind the property. I moved slowly, carefully, trying not to make any noise. Part of me felt ridiculous, a 63-year-old woman creeping through the woods like some kind of private detective. But the larger part of me knew this was necessary. When I reached the storage shed, I had a clear view of the back of the house. The curtains were open. Through the large windows that faced the lake, I could see directly into the living room. Victoria and the man had moved from the couch. They were standing in the kitchen now, near the island where Robert used to make his famous Sunday morning pancakes. The man was pouring wine into 2 glasses. My wine, a bottle of Pinot Noir that David had given me last Christmas. I raised the camera with trembling hands and started taking photographs. Click. Sandra accepting the wine glass. Click. The man's hand on her waist. Click. Sandra leaning into him, her head on his shoulder. Click. A kiss. A long one. Each photograph felt like a knife in my chest, but I kept taking them. 20, 30, 40 pictures over the next 20 minutes. I documented everything: the timestamps, the GPS coordinates, every detail that might matter in court. Because that's where this was heading, wasn't it? This was going to end in divorce court. My son was going to lose his marriage, and these 2 beautiful children were going to grow up in a broken home. And it was all because of the woman I'd welcomed into our family 8 years ago. The woman I'd treated like a daughter. The man and Sandra moved toward the back door. For a moment I thought they were coming outside, and I pressed myself against the wall of the shed, barely breathing. But they stopped at the door, just standing there, looking out at the lake. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against him. They looked so comfortable together, so natural, like a real couple. This wasn't some impulsive fling. This was a relationship. After a few more minutes, they disappeared from my view, heading deeper into the house. I waited, my heart hammering. About 15 minutes later, I heard the front door open. I crept around the side of the shed until I could see the driveway. The man was walking toward the silver BMW. He was maybe 40, 45 years old. Tall, dark hair with a few streaks of silver at the temples. He wore expensive-looking clothes, a sport coat, and designer jeans. He carried himself with the confidence of someone successful, someone used to getting what he wanted. He got into the BMW and started the engine. I raised the camera one more time and photographed the license plate. Clear shot. Perfect focus. After he drove away, I stayed hidden for another 10 minutes. I wanted to see what Sandra would do next. Eventually, she came out the front door carrying her purse and a shopping bag from some boutique in Columbus. She looked around carefully before locking the house with a key. A key to my house. I'd given David a spare key years ago, and apparently he'd given it to Sandra. Now she was using it to bring her lover to my property. She got into her white Lexus SUV and drove away in the opposite direction from the BMW Smart. They weren't leaving together. They weren't taking any chances of being seen. I waited until both cars had been gone for at least 15 minutes before I walked back to the lake house. I let myself in with my own key and looked around. The wine glasses had been washed and put away. The couch cushions were straightened. Everything was exactly as I'd left it last weekend when I'd come up to open the house for spring. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I never would have known anyone had been here. Sandra was careful, meticulous. How long had this been going on? I walked through the house looking for any other signs. In the master bedroom, the room where Robert and I had slept for 40 summers, I found something that made my blood run cold. The bed was made, but not quite the way I'd left it. The pillows were in different positions. There was a slight indentation in the comforter right in the middle, the kind of indentation 2 people would leave. I stood in the doorway of that bedroom, and I felt a rage building inside me that I'd never experienced before. Not just for the betrayal of my son, but for the violation of my home, my memories, Robert's memory. Sandra had brought her lover here to this sacred place and used it like some cheap hotel room. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Rage wouldn't help David. Only evidence would. Only a plan. My phone rang. Tom Mitchell wondering where I was. I apologized and asked if we could reschedule for next week. He was understanding, probably thought I was just a forgetful old lady who'd mixed up her appointment times. Let him think that. After Tom's call, I sat down at the kitchen table with the legal pad I always kept in my purse. This was what I did best once upon a time. Building cases, analyzing facts, planning strategies. First question, who was the man I had his license plate number? I still had contacts from my legal career who could help with that. My old colleague Frank Peterson ran a private investigation firm. We'd worked together on dozens of corporate cases over the years. He was discreet, professional, and thorough. I pulled out my phone and called Frank. "Jessica Matthews," Frank said when he answered. "Been a while. How's retirement treating you?" "Frank, I need your help." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "It's personal, and it needs to stay confidential." There was a pause. Frank had known me long enough to read between the lines. "How confidential are we talking? Family matter?" "I see." Another pause. "What do you need?" I gave him the license plate number and asked him to find out everything he could about the owner. Name, address, employment, marital status. Everything. Frank didn't ask why. That's what I'd always appreciated about him. He understood that some things needed to be handled quietly. "I'll call you back in a couple hours," he said. I drove back to Cincinnati in a daze. The 2-hour drive gave me too much time to think. Too much time to replay what I'd seen. Sandra's laugh. The way she'd leaned into that man. The wine glasses, the bedroom. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it all over again. I thought about David, my beautiful boy who had grown into such a good man. He worked so hard to provide for his family. Every extra hour at the office, every business trip he took was for them, for Sandra and the kids. And this is what she was doing while he was away. By the time I got home, I had a pounding headache. I took 2 aspirin and sat in Robert's old study, surrounded by his law books and the photographs of our life together. David as a baby, David's first day of school, David's college graduation, David's wedding to Sandra. I picked up that last photograph, David and Sandra on their wedding day, both of them glowing with happiness. I'd stood right next to them in that picture, but someone had cropped me out when they had it framed. I'd never really thought about that before. My phone rang at 6:47 p.m. Frank. "The BMW is registered to Bradley Thornton," he said without preamble. "Age 42, home address in Upper Arlington." Upper Arlington, one of the wealthiest suburbs of Columbus. Of course. "He's a financial advisor," Frank continued. "Works at Thornton and Associates. Been with the firm 15 years. And Jessica, he's married. Wife's name is Jennifer. They've been married 14 years, 2 kids. I closed my eyes. The betrayal had layers. "How long do you think this affair has been going on?" "That's going to require more digging. Phone records, credit card statements, that kind of thing. It'll take time and resources." "Money's not an issue." My voice was flat. "My son's future is at stake." "Understood. I'll put my best people on it. Give me a week." A week felt like an eternity. But I knew Frank was right. This needed to be done properly. "There's one more thing," I said. "Can you have someone keep an eye on Sandra? Discreet surveillance. I need to know where she goes, who she meets." "Consider it done." After I hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of Robert's study, thinking, planning. I couldn't tell David yet. Not until I had the full picture. Not until I could present him with evidence so overwhelming that Sandra couldn't talk her way out of it. Because I knew my son. David loved Sandra. He'd want to believe there was some explanation, some misunderstanding. No, I needed to be strategic about this. I needed professional advice. I pulled up my contacts and found Patricia Mendez's number. Patricia was one of the best family law attorneys in Ohio. We'd worked on opposite sides of several corporate cases over the years, and I respected her judgment completely. I called and left a message. "Patricia, it's Jessica Matthews. I need to consult with you on a family law matter. Confidential. Please call me back as soon as you can." She called back 20 minutes later. "Jessica, good to hear from you. What's going on?" I told her everything. The lake house, the photographs, the license plate, Bradley Thornton, all of it. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "This is bad," she finally said. "But it's also an opportunity. If your son wants a divorce, he'll have grounds. More importantly, if there's any financial misconduct involved that gives him significant leverage for custody and property settlement." Financial misconduct. Think about it. Where do affairs like this take place? Hotels, restaurants, weekend trips. All of that costs money. If Sandra's been using marital funds to finance this relationship, that's dissipation of marital assets. In Ohio, that can significantly impact how property gets divided. My lawyer brain kicked into gear. And custody. If she's been systematically lying to David, making decisions that prioritize her affair over her children's welfare, yes, that could absolutely factor into custody decisions. I felt a small spark of hope for the first time since this afternoon. What's the first step? Let Frank do his investigation. In the meantime, I'll draw up some preliminary documents. We need to be prepared to move quickly if necessary. Can you come to my office tomorrow? I'll be there. After I hung up with Patricia, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I missed Robert with an ache that hadn't dulled much in 3 years. "What would you do?" I whispered to the empty room. "How would you handle this?" But I already knew. Robert would have done exactly what I was doing. He would have protected our son. He would have gathered evidence. He would have built an airtight case. And then he would have... The next morning, I met with Patricia at her office. She had already started pulling together documents, preliminary divorce filings, custody agreements, restraining order templates, just in case. "We won't file anything yet," she assured me. "But I want everything ready. When the time comes, we need to be able to move fast." Why fast? Because once Sandra realizes she's been caught, she might try to hide assets, move money around, take the kids and disappear. We need to be one step ahead. A chill ran down my spine. You think she'd take Emma and Michael? People do desperate things when they're cornered, Jessica. We need to be prepared for anything. I left Patricia's office with a thick folder of documents and a growing sense of dread. This was really happening. My son's marriage was ending, and I was the one who was going to have to tell him. The week crawled by. I barely slept. Every time my phone rang, I jumped thinking it might be Frank with news. Or worse, David somehow having found out on his own. But David called every few days, just like always, telling me about his work about the kids. He sounded happy, normal, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife was destroying their family. It broke my heart. On the 6th day, Frank called. "You need to come to my office," he said. His voice was grim. "I've got the full report, and Jessica, you need to see this in person." I drove to Frank's office in downtown Cincinnati, my stomach in knots. He met me in his conference room where he'd spread out what looked like a mountain of documents, photographs, and printed emails. "Sit down," he said gently. I sat. "The affair has been going on for at least 18 months, Frank began. "We've documented 53 separate meetings between Sandra and Bradley Thornton. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even a weekend trip to Chicago that Sandra told David was a girl's getaway with college friends." He slid a photograph across the table. Sandra and Bradley walking hand in hand through Chicago's Millennium Park. "But that's not the worst part," Frank continued. My stomach dropped. "There's worse." Frank pulled out a thick stack of papers. Bank statements. Sandra has been making withdrawals from the joint checking account she shares with David. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there. But over the past year, the amounts have increased. $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. Always in cash. Always when David was traveling for work. He showed me a spreadsheet. Column after column of withdrawals highlighted in yellow. The total is $73,000, Jessica. I stared at the number, unable to process it. $73,000. That we can prove. There might be more. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Where did the money go? That's where it gets interesting. Frank pulled out more documents. We tracked some of it. Sandra has a P.O. box in Columbus that David doesn't know about. She's been receiving statements from a brokerage account also in her name only. She opened it 14 months ago with a $15,000 deposit. She's hiding money. Lots of it. We also found this. He showed me incorporation papers. Sandra formed an LLC in Delaware 6 months ago, Brightside Ventures. She's the sole owner. I leafed through the documents, my hands shaking. This wasn't just an affair. This was premeditated. Sandra had been planning to leave David, and she'd been systematically stealing from him to prepare. There's more, Frank said quietly. How can there be more? He pulled out another file. Bradley Thornton. On the surface, he looked successful. Nice house, good job, stable family. But dig a little deeper and things get interesting. His firm is under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC. They suspect he's been running a Ponzi scheme with some of his high-net-worth clients. Nothing's been filed yet, but my sources tell me it's coming. Bradley's in serious financial trouble. I stared at Frank, trying to understand. So he's using Sandra, or maybe they're using each other. Hard to say. But here's what we know for certain. Bradley took out a second mortgage on his house 8 months ago. The money disappeared into his business. He's been bleeding cash trying to cover up the fraud. And right around that same time, Sandra started making those larger withdrawals from her account with David. The pieces fell into place. She's been giving Bradley money. We can't prove it directly, but the timing is too coincidental. Sandra withdraws $5,000 in cash. 2 days later, Bradley makes a deposit into his business account for $4,800. It happens over and over. I sat back in my chair, stunned. My daughter-in-law wasn't just betraying my son emotionally. She was stealing from him to fund her lover's criminal enterprise. Does Jennifer Thornton know, I asked, Bradley's wife? About the affair, unknown. About the financial problems? Definitely not. I did some checking. Jennifer's a high school teacher. She thinks they're wealthy. She has no idea her husband is about to be indicted by the federal government. I thought about Jennifer Thornton, this woman I'd never met who was about to have her life destroyed just like David's, just like mine. I want to meet her, I said suddenly. Frank raised an eyebrow. Why? Because she deserves to know the truth, just like David does. And because, I paused, thinking it through, because 2 heads are better than 1. If Jennifer and I work together, we have a better chance of protecting our families. Frank looked skeptical. That's risky. Jennifer might react badly. She might warn Bradley. Or she might be an ally. Either way, I need to try. Frank studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll get you her contact information. But Jessica, be careful. You're playing with fire here. I gathered up all the documents, the photographs, the bank statements, the incorporation papers, and put them in my briefcase. I've been playing with fire for 40 years, Frank. I know how not to get burned. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling thinking about everything Frank had told me. $73,000, 18 months, a LLC in Delaware, a Ponzi scheme. It was so much worse than I'd imagined. I kept thinking about David, about how hard he worked. He'd put in 60-hour weeks for years climbing the corporate ladder, all so he could provide a good life for his family. He'd missed baseball games and dance recitals because he was in meetings. He'd spent his wedding anniversary in San Francisco for a client presentation. All for Sandra. All for the kids. And she'd been stealing from him, using his money to support her lover. Around 3 a.m., I got up and went to Robert's study. I pulled out the photo albums from when David was young. Page after page of memories. David's first birthday covered in cake. David on his first day of kindergarten, gap-toothed and grinning. David at his high school graduation, so proud in his cap and gown. And then the later photos. David and Sandra's engagement party. Their wedding. The day Emma was born. Michael's baptism. Sandra was in all of them, smiling. Playing the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect daughter-in-law. How long had she been lying? I found a photo from 2 Christmases ago. We were all at my house. Robert had been gone about a year. David and Sandra sat on the couch with the kids opening presents. I was in the background pouring coffee. Sandra had given me a cashmere scarf that Christmas. Expensive, beautiful. She'd hugged me and said, "You're the mother I never had, Mom, Jessica. I'm so grateful for you." I'd cried. My own mother had passed away years before, and having Sandra call me Mom had meant everything to me. Now I knew it was all a performance. I put the photo albums away and tried to sleep, but the sun was already coming up. I'd been awake all night. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table trying to decide what to do next. I had the evidence. I had Patricia ready to file divorce papers. I had Frank continuing to investigate. but I still hadn't told David. How do you tell your son that his wife has been betraying him? That the woman he loves, the mother of his children, has been systematically destroying their life together? My phone rang at 8:07 a.m. Unknown number. Mrs. Matthews. A woman's voice tentative. Yes, this is Angela Torres. I work for Frank Peterson. He asked me to conduct surveillance on Sandra Matthews. My heart started pounding. Yes. I thought you should know. This morning at 6:30, Sandra dropped the children at her mother's house. Then she drove to the lake house. Your lake house. I gripped the phone tighter. Is she still there? Yes, ma'am. And Bradley Thornton's BMW just pulled into the driveway. Of course she'd brought him back there. Thank you, Angela. Please continue monitoring and document everything. Will do, ma'am. After I hung up, I sat there shaking with rage. Sandra was at my lake house right now. With him. In the home Robert and I had built together. I wanted to drive up there. I wanted to confront them both. I wanted to scream at Sandra to ask her how she could do this to David, to the kids, to me. But I forced myself to stay calm. Forced myself to think like a lawyer instead of a mother. There would be time for confrontation later. Right now, I needed more evidence. I called Frank. Can Angela get photos? Already on it. She's got a telephoto lens. She'll document everything. Good. I spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself. I cleaned the house. I did laundry. I paid bills. Normal everyday tasks that felt surreal given what was happening. At 3 p.m., my phone rang. It was Emma. Grandma Jessica. Her sweet voice nearly broke me. Can you come to my dance recital on Saturday? Please, I'm going to be a butterfly. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Of course, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Mommy says you're probably too busy. Mommy's wrong. Grandma's never too busy for you. Yay, I love you, Grandma Jessica. I love you too, baby girl. After I hung up, I let the tears fall. Those children, Emma and Michael, they were going to be caught in the middle of this nightmare. They were going to watch their family fall apart. And there wasn't a damn thing I could do to protect them from that pain. Frank called back that evening with Angela's surveillance photos. He emailed them to me and I opened them on my laptop. More photos of Sandra and Bradley. At the lake house, in the bedroom, on the deck. But there was something else. Something Angela had captured that made my blood run cold. A photo of Sandra at the lake house taken from a distance. She was standing in Robert's old workshop behind the house, the one he'd used for his woodworking projects. The door was open and I could see what she was doing. She was opening the safe. Robert had installed a floor safe in the workshop years ago. We kept important documents there, deeds, titles, insurance policies. I hadn't been in there since he died. I couldn't bear to. But Sandra knew about it, and she was opening it. I called Angela immediately. How did she know the combination? I don't know, ma'am, but she went right to it. Didn't even hesitate. Did you see what she took? She pulled out a large envelope, put it in her purse. Then she closed the safe and left. I thanked Angela and hung up. Then I sat there, my mind racing. David had the combination to that safe. I'd given it to him years ago in case anything happened to Robert and me. David must have shared it with Sandra. But what had she taken? I grabbed my keys and drove to the lake house. I didn't care if they might still be there. I didn't care about being careful anymore. I needed to know what was in that envelope. The drive to the lake house usually took 2 hours. I made it in 90 minutes. When I pulled into the driveway, both Sandra's car and Bradley's BMW were gone. The house was empty. I went straight to the workshop. The door was unlocked. Sandra hadn't even bothered to secure it. The safe was exactly as Robert had left it 3 years ago. I entered the combination with shaking fingers. The door swung open. Most of the contents were still there. Property deeds, insurance policies, Robert's will. But one thing was missing. The envelope containing the stock certificates for Robert's company. Robert had been an architect. Before he retired, he'd built up a small but successful firm. When he sold it 15 years ago, part of the sale agreement was that he'd retain a 20% ownership stake. Every quarter we received dividend checks. Those stock certificates were worth approximately $400,000, and Sandra had just stolen them. I sat back on my heels, stunned. This was so much bigger than I'd thought. Sandra wasn't just having an affair. She wasn't just stealing cash from their bank account. She was systematically looting every asset she could get her hands on. and she was doing it right under David's nose. I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. "We need to move, now." Patricia met me at her office at 10 p.m. that night. She'd called in 2 associates, and they worked through the night preparing documents. "We're filing for an emergency restraining order first thing Monday morning," Patricia explained. "We'll freeze all joint accounts, all joint assets. We'll ask the court to order Sandra to return the stock certificates. Will the judge grant it? With this evidence, absolutely. We've got photographs, bank records, witness testimony. We've got her dead to rights." "But I still haven't told David." Patricia looked at me seriously. "You need to tell him this weekend, before we file on Monday. He needs to hear it from you, not from a process server." I knew she was right, but the thought of that conversation made me feel sick. "How do I do it?" I asked. "How do I tell my son that his wife has been lying to him for 18 months, that she's stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars, that she's having an affair with a man who's about to be indicted for fraud?" "You tell him the truth," Patricia said simply. "You show him the evidence, and you let him make his own decisions. What if he doesn't believe me? What if he thinks I'm lying? Then he'll verify it himself, and he'll come to the same conclusion." "But Jessica, in my experience, people know. Deep down, they know when something's wrong. David might be shocked, but I doubt he'll be completely surprised." I drove home in the early hours of Saturday morning, exhausted but wired on adrenaline. I had less than 48 hours before I had to tell David everything. Saturday afternoon, I went to Emma's dance recital. She was adorable in her butterfly costume, fluttering around the stage. Sandra was there, of course, playing the devoted mother. She hugged me when I arrived. "Mom, Jessica, I'm so glad you could make it. Emma was so worried you wouldn't come." I wanted to push her away. I wanted to scream at her. Instead, I smiled and hugged her back. I wouldn't miss it for the world. We sat together during the performance. Sandra chatted about Emma's dance lessons, about Michael's upcoming t-ball season, about the vacation they were planning for summer. All lies, all performance. After the recital, David showed up. He'd cut his trip short to make it home in time. He hugged Emma, told her she was the most beautiful butterfly he'd ever seen. He kissed Sandra. He put his arm around me. My perfect family, built on lies. "Mom, you want to get dinner with us?" David asked. "The kids want pizza." I almost said yes. I almost pretended everything was fine for one more night. But then I looked at Sandra, at the way she smiled at me with such false warmth, and I couldn't do it. "Actually, David, I need to talk to you. Tomorrow. It's important." He looked concerned. "Is everything okay? Are you sick?" "I'm fine, but we need to talk. Just you and me. Can you come by the house around 10? "Sure, Mom. Of course." That night I barely slept again. I kept rehearsing what I would say, how I would show him the evidence, how I would watch my son's heart break. Sunday morning arrived too quickly. David arrived at exactly 10 a.m. He was wearing jeans and a polo shirt, casual and relaxed. He had no idea his life was about to change forever. "Hey, Mom, what's going on? You sounded pretty serious yesterday." I led him into Robert's study. I'd laid out everything on the desk. The photographs, the bank statements, the surveillance reports, the timeline Frank had created. "Sit down, David." He sat looking confused. "Mom, you're scaring me. What is all this?" I took a deep breath. 40 years of practicing law, and this was the hardest case I'd ever had to present. Last Thursday, I went to the lake house to meet with Tom Mitchell about the dock repair. I told him everything. The BMW in the driveway, the laughter I'd heard, Sandra on the couch with another man, the photographs I'd taken. David's face went pale. He started shaking his head before I even finished. "No, that's not possible. Sandra would never—" I slid the first photograph across the desk. Sandra and Bradley kissing in the lake house kitchen. David stared at it for a long time. His hands were trembling. I watched my son's heart shatter in real time, and it nearly destroyed me. "How long?" His voice was barely a whisper. I slid the timeline across to him. "At least 18 months. Frank documented 53 separate meetings, hotels, restaurants. The trip to Chicago you thought was with her college friends, she was with him the entire time." David picked up the photograph again, studying it like he could somehow make it show something different if he looked long enough. "Who is he?" "His name is Bradley Thornton. He's a financial advisor. He's married with 2 kids." "Does his wife know?" Not yet. David set down the photograph and rubbed his face with both hands. I can't believe this. Sandra and we've been happy, haven't we? My heart broke for him. David, there's more. More? How can there be more? I showed him the bank statements, the highlighted withdrawals. Sandra has been taking money from your joint account, $73,000 over the past 18 months. David went even paler. 73,000? She opened accounts you don't know about. A brokerage account. She even formed an LLC in Delaware. She's been systematically hiding money. I watched him process this, saw the moment when he realized the full extent of the betrayal. This wasn't just about sex. This wasn't just about broken vows. This was calculated, premeditated theft. Why? He finally asked. Why would she do this? Because she was planning to leave you, David. She was preparing for divorce. And there's more you need to know about Bradley Thornton. I told him about the SEC investigation, about the Ponzi scheme, about how Bradley was likely using Sandra's money, David's money, to cover up his fraud. David stood up abruptly and walked to the window. He stood there for a long time, looking out at the backyard where he'd played as a child, where Robert had taught him to throw a baseball, where we'd had his high school graduation party. Finally, he turned around. What do I do, Mom? This was the moment, the decision point. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted me to tell him what to do. He wanted me to fix this, but I couldn't. This had to be his choice. Patricia Mendez is prepared to file for divorce tomorrow morning. She'll also file for an emergency restraining order to freeze all accounts and force Sandra to return the assets she's stolen. The kids, Patricia will petition for full custody. With Sandra's behavior, her deception, the financial fraud, David, you'll have a strong case. I can't just take the kids from their mother. You're not taking them from her. She chose this path. She chose to lie, to steal, to destroy your family. Now there are consequences. David's eyes filled with tears. I love her, Mom. Even after all this, I still love her. I stood up and went to him, putting my hand on his shoulder. I know, sweetheart. Love doesn't die just because we want it to. But love alone isn't enough. Not when there's this much betrayal. Not when she's been stealing from you to support another man. Does she love him? This Bradley guy? I thought about the photographs, about the body language, the intimacy. I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe she's using him like he's using her. David wiped his eyes. I want to talk to her. I need to hear it from her. Not yet. We need to secure the assets first. If you confront her now, she might drain the accounts. She might take the kids and run. Run where? I showed him the incorporation papers for the LLC. She's been planning this for months, David. We don't know what else she has in place. We need to be smart about this. David nodded slowly. He looked older somehow, like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. Okay, I trust you, Mom. What's the next step? Tomorrow morning, Patricia files the paperwork. The court will issue a temporary restraining order freezing all assets. Then and only then we tell Sandra that we know. And the kids, where will they be? With you. We'll have the police present when we confront Sandra just in case. The restraining order will give you temporary custody until the hearing. David sat back down heavily. This is really happening. My marriage is over. I'm so sorry, David. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Did you know before last Thursday? No, I swear to you I had no idea. How did you stay so calm? How did you put all this together without falling apart? I thought about the sleepless nights, the rage, the tears I'd cried alone in the dark. I didn't stay calm. I did what I had to do to protect you. That's what mothers do. David stood up and hugged me. He held on tight like he was a little boy again, and I could make everything better, but I couldn't make this better. I could only help him survive it. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for being strong when I couldn't be. After David left, I sat alone in Robert's study for a long time. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow we'd set the legal machinery in motion that would end David's marriage and reshape his family. I looked at Robert's photograph on the desk. I hope I'm doing the right thing, I whispered. But deep down I knew I was. I was protecting my son. I was protecting my grandchildren. And tomorrow Sandra would finally face the consequences of her choices. Monday morning arrived with gray clouds and cold rain. I barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sandra's face. The way she'd looked at me through the window of the lake house. The smile she'd given me at Emma's dance recital, so false, so practiced. I was up at 5 a.m. going through the documents one more time. The photographs, the bank statements, the timeline Frank had created. Everything needed to be perfect. At 6:30, David called. "I didn't sleep," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I kept thinking about what you said, about Sandra planning to take the kids to France. David, I looked at our passports last night, after the kids went to bed. Sandra's passport is brand new, applied for it 2 months ago, said she needed to renew it, but her old one wasn't even expired yet." My stomach dropped. She was preparing. And the kids' passports, she had them renewed too, said it was just in case we wanted to take a family vacation. He laughed bitterly. A family vacation. To France, without me. "We're stopping her today, David. That's what this hearing is for. What if the judge doesn't believe us? What if Sandra convinces them that we're overreacting?" "She won't. We have too much evidence. Patricia knows what she's doing." There was a long pause. "Mom, thank you for everything. I know I said some things yesterday about you waiting too long to tell me. I was wrong. You did exactly what you needed to do." Tears stung my eyes. "I love you, sweetheart. We're going to get through this." "I love you too." I met Patricia at the courthouse at 8 a.m. She was already there, standing outside Judge Rodriguez's chambers with 3 large file boxes. "Good morning, Jessica. Ready to make history? History. This is one of the most comprehensive evidence packets I've ever compiled for a family law case. If this doesn't convince Judge Rodriguez, nothing will." We were ushered into the judge's chambers at 8:15. Judge Maria Rodriguez was a legend in Ohio family law. 55 years old, steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, sharp eyes that missed absolutely nothing. I'd appeared before her twice during my career, once representing a corporation in a shareholder dispute, once defending a client in a contract case. She'd ruled against me both times. She was brilliant, uncompromising, and had zero tolerance for lies. Perfect. "Ms. Mendez, Mrs. Matthews." Judge Rodriguez nodded to us as we sat. "I've reviewed your emergency motion. It's quite extensive. Your Honor, this case involves systematic dissipation of marital assets, fraud, adultery, and attempted parental kidnapping," Patricia said. "We felt it necessary to be thorough." Thorough is an understatement. The judge tapped the thick folder on her desk. "You're alleging that Mrs. Sandra Matthews has stolen over $200,000 from her husband, conducted an 18-month affair, formed a secret LLC, and was planning to flee the country with the minor children. That's serious." "We can prove every allegation, Your Honor." "Show me." For the next 45 minutes, Patricia walked Judge Rodriguez through everything. She started with the photographs from the lake house, time-stamped GPS, tagged unmistakable. Sandra and Bradley Thornton kissing, embracing, clearly intimate. "Who took these photographs?" the judge asked. "I did, Your Honor," I said. "I witnessed the affair at my property. I'm a retired attorney. I understand the importance of documentation." Judge Rodriguez studied me. "You're David Matthews' mother." "Yes, Your Honor." "And this is your lake house where the affair was photographed." "Yes, Your Honor. My late husband Robert and I bought it 40 years ago. Sandra has a key because my son gave her one. She used my property to conduct her affair." The judge's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Disapproval. Patricia continued. She showed the bank statements next. Page after page of withdrawals. Small at first, 300 here, 500 there. Then larger. 2,000. 5,000. All in cash. All when David was traveling for work. "We've documented $73,000 in cash withdrawals over 18 months, Patricia said. "But that's just the beginning." She pulled out the brokerage account statements, the LLC incorporation papers, the P.O. Box rental agreement. Mrs. Sandra Matthews opened a brokerage account in her name only 14 months ago. Initial deposit, $15,000. Source of funds, the joint checking account she shares with her husband. She also formed a Delaware LLC called Brightside Ventures. Sole owner. Purpose Investment Consulting. Reality a shell company to hide assets. Judge Rodriguez was taking notes. And Mr. Matthews knew nothing about these accounts. Nothing, Your Honor. My son had no idea his wife was systematically looting their assets. Where did the money go? The judge asked. Patricia pulled out more documents. Some went into the brokerage account, some into the LLC, but a significant amount, we estimate over $80,000, was given to Bradley Thornton. The man in the photographs. Yes, Your Honor. Bradley Thornton is a financial advisor at Thornton & Associates. He's also under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission for running a Ponzi scheme with his client's money. The judge looked up sharply. SEC investigation. Active and ongoing. We have documentation. Patricia slid over another folder. Bradley Thornton has been using Mrs. Matthews using David Matthews' money to cover up his fraud. He took out a second mortgage on his home 8 months ago. The money disappeared into his business, and right around that same time, Sandra's withdrawals increased dramatically. Judge Rodriguez studied the documents in silence. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on her wall and the rain against the windows. Finally, she spoke. You mentioned attempted kidnapping. Yes, Your Honor. Patricia pulled out the final bombshell. 3 one-way tickets to Paris, purchased by Sandra Matthews 6 weeks ago. Departure date May 1st, 3 weeks from now. She laid out printed copies of the ticket confirmations. Sandra Matthews, Emma Matthews, Michael Matthews. No ticket for David Matthews, the judge observed. No, Your Honor. Sandra was planning to take the children and flee to France. She has dual citizenship through her grandmother. She could disappear into the French system, and U.S. custody orders would be extremely difficult to enforce. Judge Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. She was quiet for a long moment, studying all the evidence spread across her desk. This is one of the most egregious cases of asset dissipation and parental planning I've seen in 20 years on the bench, she said finally. Miss Mendez, what are you asking for? Emergency freeze on all joint accounts, Your Honor. Immediate temporary custody to the father with supervised visitation only for the mother. And we're asking the court to order Mrs. Matthews to return certain items she's stolen. What items? I spoke up. Stock certificates, Your Honor. My late husband Robert owned 20% of an architectural firm. When he passed, those stocks became part of his estate. They're worth approximately $400,000. Sandra stole them from a secure safe at the lake house. You have proof. Video surveillance, Your Honor, Patricia said. We installed a camera after we suspected Sandra had access to the safe. We have footage of her opening it and removing an envelope containing the certificates. Judge Rodriguez nodded slowly. I'm going to grant your emergency motion. All joint accounts frozen as of this moment. Temporary custody to David Matthews. Sandra Matthews is ordered to return the stock certificates within 72 hours or face contempt charges. She looked at me directly. Mrs. Matthews, the senior. Mrs. Matthews, you understand this is just the beginning. There will be a full hearing. Sandra's attorney will have a chance to present her defense. I understand, Your Honor. And you're prepared for what this will do to your family, this kind of public divorce proceeding. The children will be affected. The children are already affected, Your Honor. Their mother was planning to kidnap them and take them to another country. I'd rather they grow up in a broken home here in Ohio, where their father can see them, than never see them again. Judge Rodriguez studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. Patricia, you'll need to serve these papers today. I want law enforcement present when you do. Given the flight risk, I'm also issuing a BOLO for Sandra Matthews. If she attempts to leave the state with those children, she's to be arrested immediately. Understood, Your Honor. One more thing. The judge looked at both of us. If Sandra Matthews has been this deceptive about this affair and these financial transactions, assume there's more you haven't found yet. People who lie about one thing usually lie about many things. Keep digging. Those words sent a chill down my spine. More, what else could Sandra possibly be hiding? David met us at his house at 2 p.m. 2 police officers were already there, parked discreetly down the street in an unmarked car. Patricia had coordinated everything with the local police department. They knew this could go badly. Sandra's white Lexus was in the driveway. She was home. David stood on his own front porch, looking at his house like he'd never seen it before. His hands were shaking. I bought this house for her, he said quietly. 5 years ago. She wanted the good school district, the big backyard for the kids, the neighborhood with the other young families. I worked overtime for 6 months to afford the down payment. I put my hand on his shoulder. David, she picked out every piece of furniture, every paint color, every curtain. This house is hers more than mine." He looked at me, his eyes red. "How do I walk in there and tell her to leave?" "Because it's not just her house," Patricia said gently. "It's your house, your children's house. And she's the one who broke the rules. She's the one who has to face consequences." David nodded, but he didn't move. "I'll go first," I said. "If you want." "No." He straightened his shoulders. "No, I need to do this." He used his key to unlock the door. We walked in together, David, Patricia, me, and the 2 police officers who'd come up behind us. Sandra was in the kitchen, her back to us, loading the dishwasher. She was humming something, a song from Emma's dance recital. "Sandra," David Saz said. She turned around and her face lit up when she saw him. "David, you're home early. I wasn't expecting you until—" Then she saw Patricia and me, the police officers behind us. Her smile disappeared. "What's going on?" Her eyes darted between all of us, calculating. "David, what is this?" "This is Patricia Mendez. She's a family law attorney." David's voice was remarkably steady, but I could see his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "We need to talk." "About what?" But Sandra's face was already going pale. She knew. On some level, she had to know. David pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking as he opened the photo gallery and showed her the first image. Sandra and Bradley Thornton kissing in the lake house kitchen. The color drained completely from Sandra's face. That's not... "Don't," David's voice cracked. "Don't lie to me anymore. I know everything, Sandra. The affair, the money, Bradley Thornton, the plane tickets to France, all of it." Sandra's legs seemed to give out. She grabbed the counter to steady herself. "David, please, let me explain. It's not what you think. I can explain $73,000. David's voice was rising now. "You stole $73,000 from our account. How is that not what I think?" "I didn't steal. That was our money. I had every right. You had no right to hide it," David was shouting now, and I saw tears streaming down his face. "You had no right to give it to your lover. You had no right to plan to take my children to another country." Patricia stepped forward, her voice calm and professional. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm serving you with an emergency court order." She handed Sandra a thick envelope. "All joint accounts have been frozen as of this morning. You're ordered to return the stock certificates you took from the lake house safe within 72 hours. And effective immediately, David has temporary custody of Emma and Michael." Sandra staggered backward. The envelope fell from her hands. No, you can't take my children. They're my babies. You can't. You did this to yourself," I said quietly. Sandra's head whipped around to me. Her expression transformed from shock to pure hatred. You did this. You've been spying on me, following me, turning my husband against me. I saw you with another man in my house," I said, keeping my voice level even though my heart was pounding. "I didn't turn David against you. You did that all by yourself when you decided to betray him." "Betray him?" Sandra was screaming now. "You want to talk about betrayal? What about him? What about all the times he chose work over me, all the business trips, all the late nights, all the times I needed him, and he wasn't there?" "That's not fair," David said. His voice was quiet now, wounded. "I was providing for us. I was trying to build a future. I didn't need a future. I needed a husband. I needed someone who was actually present." Sandra was crying hard now, mascara running down her face. "Do you even remember the miscarriage, David? Do you remember what that was like for me?" David's face went white. "Of course I remember. That was the worst day of... You weren't even there. You were in Boston. I called you crying, bleeding, terrified, and you told me you'd come home the next day. The next day I lost our baby alone. David alone." "That's not true." David's voice broke. "I flew home that same day I canceled my presentation. I was with you. I held you all night while you cried." "No!" Sandra shook her head violently. "That's what you tell yourself. That's the story you've convinced yourself is true. But I was there. I lived it. You didn't come home until the next day. You chose work over me when I needed you most." I watched this unfold with a growing sense of horror, because I remembered this. David had called me from the airport sobbing, saying Sandra had lost the baby and he was flying home immediately. He'd made it back to Columbus by 8 p.m. that same night. I was certain of it because I'd offered to fly up with him, and he'd said no, he needed to be alone with Sandra. But Sandra genuinely believed her version. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't manipulation. She truly believed David hadn't come home. Sandra, I said carefully. David's phone records would show, I don't care about phone records. She was hysterical now. I know what I experienced. I know how abandoned I felt, and none of you can tell me I'm remembering wrong. One of the police officers stepped forward. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Calm down, they're taking my children. How am I supposed to calm down? Where are Emma and Michael? I asked David quietly. At my mom's house, he murmured. They were supposed to stay there until 5. I didn't want them here for this. Thank God. Sandra suddenly seemed to realize the same thing. Where are my babies? Where are they? They're safe, David said. They're with my mother. I want to see them. I want to see my children right now. That's not possible, Patricia said. The court order specifies supervised visitation only. We'll arrange a time and place with supervision present. Supervised, I'm their mother. I don't need supervision. You need supervision because you bought one-way tickets to France, I said. You were planning to kidnap them, Sandra, to take them away from their father permanently. Sandra's mouth opened and closed. She looked at David. I wasn't kidnapping them. I was protecting them. From what? David asked. His voice was hollow now, all the fight gone out of him. From me, I'm their father. I love them. What were you protecting them from? From ending up like you, Sandra whispered. Emotionally unavailable, married to your work, unable to connect. I didn't want them to grow up thinking that's what love looks like. The words hung in the air. David just stared at her. You think that's who I am? I know that's who you are, because that's who your mother made you. Sandra looked at me with such venom. She taught you that success is everything, that career matters more than family, that being present is less important than being successful. That's not true, I said, but my voice wavered. Because wasn't there some truth in it? Hadn't I worked 60-hour weeks when David was young? Hadn't I missed some school plays and parent-teacher conferences? Hadn't Robert been the one to handle most of the day-to-day parenting? Isn't it? Sandra laughed bitterly. David told me about his childhood, about how you were never home, about how his dad was the one who came to his baseball games, about how you missed his 8th grade graduation because of a trial. I had missed that. A major contract dispute that had gone to court. I thought David understood. I thought he'd forgiven me. Mom? David was looking at me. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't there more. But David, that doesn't excuse what Sandra's done. That doesn't make her affair okay. That doesn't make the stealing okay. No, David agreed. It doesn't. He turned back to Sandra. I want you to pack a bag. Take your clothes, your personal items. But everything else stays here. This is my house now. My children's home. David, please. Where's Bradley? David asked suddenly. Your lover. Where is he? Sandra's face crumpled. I don't know. He's not answering my calls. He ran, I said, 3 days ago. The FBI is looking for him. He's in Mexico City trying to avoid extradition. Sandra looked at me like I'd slapped her. That's not... Bradley wouldn't... He would, and he did, I said. He used you, Sandra, for your money, for sex, for whatever else he needed. And the moment things got difficult, he ran. You're lying. I'm not. And on some level, you know I'm not. Sandra sank down onto the kitchen floor, her back against the cabinet, sobbing. I've lost everything. Everything. You chose this, David said. His voice was hard now. Every step of the way you chose this. The affair, the lying, the stealing, the planning to run away. Those were your choices, Sandra. Not mine. Not my mother's. Yours. Patricia gestured to the police officers. Can you escort Mrs. Matthews upstairs to pack her belongings? Make sure she only takes personal items. One of the officers, a woman in her 30s, helped Sandra to her feet. Come on, ma'am. Let's get you packed up. As Sandra was led upstairs, she looked back at David one last time. Do you love me at all? After everything, do you still love me? David's face was wet with tears. I don't know who you are anymore. The woman I loved wouldn't have done any of this. Sandra's face crawled. After Sandra left, escorted by the police with one suitcase of clothes and nothing else. David, Patricia, and I stood in the silent house. David walked to the couch and sat down heavily. He put his face in his hands. I still love her, he said, his voice muffled. How fucked up is that, after everything she did? After all the lying and stealing and betrayal? I still love her. I sat down next to him. Love doesn't die just because we want it to. It should. She stole from me. She was going to take my kids. She's been lying to me for over a year. I should hate her. Maybe someday you will, or maybe you won't. Either way is okay. Patricia was walking through the house doing what she called a preliminary asset inventory, making sure Sandra hadn't taken anything she wasn't supposed to. I could hear her opening closets, checking drawers. "David," she called from upstairs, "you should come see this." We went up to the master bedroom. Patricia was standing in Sandra's closet holding a shoebox. This was hidden behind her sweaters on the top shelf. Inside were papers. Lots of papers. Bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of. Credit card bills in Sandra's name only. And most damning printed emails between Sandra and Bradley. She kept hard copies, Patricia said. People who keep hard copies of incriminating emails are either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant. We sat on the bedroom floor and read through them. With each email, my heart sank lower. From Sandra Matthews to Bradley Thornton. Date March 15th, 2025. Subject re our future. I transferred another $5,000 today. David's in Boston until Friday, so he won't notice for a while. I hate lying to him. He's been so stressed at work, but you said this is temporary. You promised that once you get through this rough patch with the SEC, we can be together openly. I'm tired of sneaking around. I'm tired of pretending to be happy in a marriage that died 2 years ago. When are you going to tell Jennifer? You keep saying soon, but it's been 6 months of soon. I love you. But I need to know this is real, that we're really going to be together. From Bradley Thornton to Sandra Matthews, date March 16th, 2025. Subject re, our future baby. I know you're frustrated. I am too. But Jennifer would take me to the cleaners if I filed for divorce right now. She'd get the house, the business, everything. I need to move some assets around first. Secure a few things. Then I can file and we can start our new life. You're so good to me. So generous. I don't know what I'd do without your support right now. The SEC investigation is bullshit, but it's expensive to fight. The money you're sending is helping me hold everything together. I promise by summer we'll be together. Just a few more months. I felt physically sick reading it. Bradley had been using Sandra's feelings and David's money to finance his legal defense against federal fraud charges. There's more, Patricia said. She handed me another email. From Sandra Matthews to Bradley Thornton, date January 10th, 2026. Subject the plan. I bought the tickets today. 3 one-way to Paris, May 1st. Just like we discussed. I'm scared, Bradley. Scared of leaving everything behind. Scared of taking the kids away from David. But you're right. He'll never let them go willingly. And if we stay, I'll end up with nothing in the divorce. At least in France, I'll have some protection through my grandmother's citizenship. You're still going to meet us there, right? You're still coming. I can't do this alone. I need to know you're going to be there. From Bradley Thornton to Sandra Matthews, date January 11th, 2026. Subject read the plan. Of course I'm coming, baby. I'll be there. I just need to wrap up a few things here first. Liquidate some assets. Get my cash out of the country. Then I'll join you in Paris and we'll start over. You're doing the right thing. David doesn't appreciate you. He never has. You and the kids deserve better. I'll give you better. I love you. He was never planning to meet her in France, Patricia said quietly. This whole time he was planning his own escape. Sandra was just a convenient distraction, someone to take the fall if his financial schemes unraveled. David hadn't said a word. He was just sitting there reading through the emails, his face getting paler with each one. May 1st, he finally said. That's 3 weeks from now. She was going to, if we hadn't found out, 3 weeks from now I would have come home and they'd just be gone. We found out, I said. That's what matters. We stopped her. But I wouldn't have known where they went. She would have just disappeared with my kids. And I'd have spent the rest of my life wondering if they were okay, if they remembered me, if they... He broke off, unable to continue. Patricia gathered up all the emails. This is actually good for us. It proves knowledge and intent. Sandra can't claim she didn't know she was doing wrong. She knew exactly what she was doing. How is any of this good? David asked. Because in court intent matters. These emails show Sandra systematically planning to defraud you and abscond with the children. That's not a momentary lapse in judgment. That's premeditated criminal activity. Patricia pulled out her phone and started photographing every document, every email, creating a digital record of everything. I kept reading. There were dozens more emails. Some were Sandra complaining about David, about how much he worked, how emotionally distant he was, how their marriage had died years ago. Some were Bradley love-bombing her, telling her she was beautiful, special, deserving of so much more. And some were financial. Sandra asking for advice on moving money without David noticing. Bradley suggesting she open accounts in her name only. Bradley explaining how to form an LLC. He'd groomed her, not just emotionally, but financially. He'd taught her how to steal from her own husband. There's something else, Patricia said. She was holding a different document. Sandra's been seeing a therapist, Dr. Wilson. There are appointment cards here going back 8 months. She never told me she was in therapy, David said. Did she seem depressed? Anxious? David thought about it. She's been distant, quieter than usual, but I thought it was just stress from the kids. Emma's had some issues at school. Michael's in that difficult phase. You thought it was normal life stress. Yeah, Patricia made a note. We should subpoena Dr. Wilson's records. If Sandra's been diagnosed with anything, depression, anxiety, personality disorder, it could be relevant for the custody evaluation. Is that even legal? I asked. Doctor-patient privilege. In custody cases, mental health records can be subpoenaed if the court deems them relevant to the child's best interest. Sandra made her mental health relevant by claiming David abandoned her emotionally. We spent another hour going through the rest of the house. Patricia wanted a complete inventory before we left. In Sandra's nightstand, we found more evidence, credit card statements showing charges at hotels I recognized from Frank's investigation, restaurant receipts, even a receipt from a jewelry store. She bought him jewelry, David said, holding up the receipt. With my credit card, a Rolex, $15,000. Where's the watch? Patricia asked. Bradley has it, I said. Probably on his wrist right now in Mexico City. David crumpled the receipt in his fist. I want her prosecuted. Criminally prosecuted. Not just divorce court. I want her charged with theft. That's your right, Patricia said. I can connect you with a prosecutor who handles financial crimes. Do it. I put my hand on David's shoulder. Are you sure that's a step that can't be undone? Sandra could go to prison. She stole from me. She was going to steal my children. She deserves prison. I couldn't argue with that. That night, after David had picked up Emma and Michael from his mother's house and taken them back to my place, I sat alone in Sandra and David's house. Patricia had left hours ago. The police had finished their report. It was just me in this empty house that had been full of so many lies. I walked through the rooms looking at the life David and Sandra had built. Photos on the walls of family vacations that I now knew Sandra had resented. Children's artwork on the refrigerator. Emma's backpack by the door. Michael's toy trucks scattered across the living room floor. This had been a home, a family, and now it was a crime scene. My phone buzzed. Frank Peterson. Jessica, I've got Bradley Thornton's wife's contact information. Jennifer Thornton. You wanted to talk to her? Yes. Are you sure that's wise? She might not react well. She deserves to know the truth, just like David did. Okay, I'm sending you her cell number now. But Jessica? Be careful. We don't know what kind of person she is. She might warn Bradley. I'll risk it. I sat down at Sandra's kitchen table, the same table where she'd probably had breakfast with David and the kids that very morning, pretending everything was fine, and dialed Jennifer Thornton's number. She answered on the third ring. Hello. Her voice was pleasant, unsuspecting. Mrs. Thornton, Jennifer Thornton. Yes? Who is this? My name is Jessica Matthews. I'm very sorry to bother you, but I have information about your husband that I think you need to know. There was a pause. Not a shocked pause, a calculating pause. What kind of information? I have evidence that Bradley has been having an affair with my daughter-in-law, and I believe he's been using money she's been stealing from my son to cover up financial crimes. Another pause, longer this time. I see. Her calm response threw me. You may. You're not surprised, Jen. Can you send me the evidence? I have an email address. She gave it to me, not a work email, but a personal Gmail account with a random string of numbers. The kind of email someone creates when they want privacy. Mrs. Thornton, I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this. I know this must be... Don't apologize. If what you're saying is true, I need to know. Send me everything you have. Every photograph, every document, every piece of evidence. I'll review it and call you back within 2 hours. She hung up. I sat there surprised by her reaction. No tears, no denial, just businesslike efficiency. I forwarded her everything, the photographs from the lake house, the emails between Sandra and Bradley, the bank statements showing the money transfers, Frank's investigation report. Everything except the parts that were David's private business. Exactly 1 hour and 43 minutes later, my phone rang. Mrs. Matthews, this is Jennifer Thornton. We need to meet. Tomorrow morning. Are you available? Yes, of course. There's a coffee shop called the Brew House. It's halfway between Cincinnati and Upper Arlington. Meet me there at 9 a.m. I'll be there. Mrs. Matthews, thank you for telling me the truth. Most people wouldn't have the courage. Most people aren't retired attorneys who've spent 40 years dealing with liars. Jennifer laughed. It was a cold sound. I think you and I are going to get along just fine. The Brew House was one of those trendy coffee shops with exposed brick walls and baristas who looked like they were auditioning for indie rock bands. I arrived 15 minutes early and ordered a latte I didn't really want. Jennifer Thornton walked in at exactly 9 a.m. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater, but somehow managed to look polished. Professional. She spotted me immediately and walked over. Mrs. Matthews, Jessica, please. Jennifer. We shook hands. Her grip was firm, confident. Thank you for meeting me. She had her own folder. Thick, organized, tabbed. She set it on the table between us. I've suspected for 6 months that Bradley was having an affair, she said without preamble. I hired my own investigator 3 months ago. She opened her folder and showed me photographs. Bradley and Sandra at restaurants, entering hotels, walking hand in hand through downtown Columbus. The same scenes Frank had documented, but from different angles, different dates. You knew? I was stunned. I knew he was cheating. I didn't know it was with your daughter-in-law specifically. I didn't know about the money. She pulled out more documents. But I knew about the SEC investigation. You did. Jennifer smiled tightly. Bradley thinks I'm just a simple high school English teacher. Sweet, naive, focused on my students and bake sales. He has no idea I have an MBA in finance from Cornell. An MBA. I worked in investment banking before we had kids. Mergers and acquisitions. 14-hour days, insane pressure clients who thought they owned you. When I got pregnant with our first, I decided I wanted a different life. I wanted to be present for my children. So I got my teaching certificate and started over. But you kept the financial skills. I kept everything, including my network of contacts in the financial world. She pulled out spreadsheets, bank records, business documents. I've been reviewing our finances for the past year. Bradley's been moving money in strange patterns, expenses that didn't make sense, transfers between accounts. I started digging deeper. The spreadsheets were incredibly detailed. She'd tracked every penny, every transaction, every anomaly. Bradley's been running a Ponzi scheme for at least 3 years, Jennifer said. Her voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. He's been using new client investments to pay returns to old clients. Classic structure. And it's all going to collapse soon. The SEC is close to filing charges. How do you know? Because I've been talking to them, cooperating with their investigation, for 2 months now. I stared at her. You've been cooperating with the FBI. SEC first, then FBI, once they realized the scope of the fraud. I've given them everything. Bank records, client lists, email correspondence. Bradley's been keeping his criminal records on our home computer. The idiot didn't even password protect the files. Does he know you know? About the Ponzi scheme? No. About the affair, I haven't confronted him yet. She took a sip of her coffee. I've been waiting for the right moment. For maximum leverage. And Mrs. Matthews, Jessica, I think you just gave me that moment. What do you want from all this? I asked. Jennifer's eyes went hard. I want Bradley to face consequences for what he's done. The fraud, the affairs, yes, plural, your daughter-in-law isn't the first all of it. I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I want full custody of our children with zero visitation. And I want to make sure your daughter-in-law understands that she was never anything more than a convenient ATM for my husband." There was steel in her voice. This wasn't a woman who would be pushed around. "I can help with that," I said. "I have evidence that proves Bradley has been manipulating Sandra, using her feelings to get money. I have emails where he promises her they'll be together, then turns around and talks about managing her." "Good. Because I have evidence that proves Sandra knew exactly what she was doing. She's not an innocent victim here, Jessica. She stole from your son knowingly and deliberately." I nodded. "I know. I've seen the emails, but I also think Sandra's more damaged than evil. I think she convinced herself of a narrative that justified her actions. That doesn't make her less culpable. It just makes her pathetic." Agreed. We spent the next 2 hours comparing notes, sharing evidence, building a strategy. Jennifer was brilliant. Her financial analysis was even more thorough than Frank's or Michael Romano's. She'd tracked every penny Bradley had stolen from his clients, every dollar Sandra had given him, every lie he'd told to both women. "The total is closer to 300,000, Jennifer said. "Not 200. There are other accounts you haven't found yet." My stomach dropped. 300,000. Bradley opened accounts in the Cayman Islands, used shell companies. Very sophisticated setup. But I found them. I've been in this business, remember I know how men like Bradley hide money. How do we prove it all? We coordinate. You file your divorce papers, freeze David's assets to prevent further theft. I do the same with Bradley. Then we both cooperate with the SEC and FBI. Bradley goes to prison for a very long time. Sandra loses everything in the divorce, and our children, yours and mine, get to grow up away from these toxic people. It was harsh, but it was also exactly what needed to happen. "There's one more thing," Jennifer said quietly. She pulled out another set of documents. "I need to tell you something. Something illegal I've done." Jennifer: "No, you need to know, because if this comes out in court, it could affect both our cases." She took a deep breath. "Over the past 6 months, I've been systematically transferring all of our marital assets into my name only. The house, the cars, our savings accounts, our children's college funds, everything. How Bradley would have to sign, I forged his signature on all the transfer documents." I stared at her. "That's fraud." "I know, but I have immunity. The FBI knows what I did. They've agreed not to prosecute in exchange for my testimony against Bradley. They helped me create a paper trail that makes it look like Bradley transferred everything himself to hide assets from the SEC. That's brilliant illegal both." Jennifer smiled grimly. "I learned from the best. My father was a white-collar defense attorney. Before he died, he taught me how the system really works, how to protect yourself, how to make sure that when the ship goes down, you're not on it. You've been planning this for 6 months. Longer. I've been preparing for this moment since I first suspected Bradley was a fraud. I just didn't know when or how it would happen." She looked at me intently. "Thank you for giving me the perfect opportunity, Jessica. What do you need from me?" "Coordination. When you file against Sandra, I file against Bradley. Same day. We blindside them both. Neither of them will have time to warn the other. Neither of them will have time to hide more assets or run. When tomorrow, Tuesday morning, Patricia can file David's divorce papers. My attorney will file mine. By noon tomorrow, both Bradley and Sandra will be served. Bradley's in Mexico City. I know. The FBI is coordinating with Mexican authorities. They'll arrest him tomorrow morning right around the time he's being served with divorce papers. It's going to be a very bad day for Bradley Thornton." I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I just felt tired. This is going to destroy 2 families. These families were already destroyed. We're just cleaning up the mess. Jennifer closed her folder. "Jessica, I know this is hard. I know you probably wish you'd never found out about the affair, that you could go back to believing your son had a happy marriage. I don't wish that. I wish Sandra had been the person we thought she was, but she wasn't. And my grandchildren deserve better than a mother who was planning to kidnap them." "Exactly." Jennifer stood up. "I'll be in touch tomorrow after we file. In the meantime, keep your son close. Keep those kids close. Because when Sandra finds out what's happening, she's going to panic. And desperate people do dangerous things." As I watched Jennifer walk out of the coffee shop, I realized something. Sandra and Bradley had picked the wrong families to betray. Jennifer and I weren't victims. We were survivors, and we were about to teach them both a very expensive lesson. Tuesday morning, 6:47 a.m. My phone rang while I was making coffee. Frank Peterson. Jessica, Sandra just tried to withdraw $5,000 from an ATM. Transaction denied. She knows the accounts are frozen. My hand tightened on the phone. Where is she now? Going into the bank. She's coming back out. She looks upset. She's getting in her car. Stay on her, Frank. Already am. Angela's tailing her. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. You bitch! Sandra's voice was shrill, hysterical. Hello, Sandra. What did you do? You froze my accounts. That's my money. Actually, it's David's money. Money you've been stealing. I didn't steal anything that was joint property. I had every right. You had no right to hide it in secret accounts, no right to give it to your lover, and you certainly had no right to plan to flee the country with my grandchildren. Silence. Then, how did you... You've been spying on me. I've been protecting my son and Emma and Michael. They're my children. She was screaming now. Are they? Because the plane tickets you bought say otherwise? 3 seats to Paris. No return date. You were going to kidnap them, Sandra. I heard her breathing rapid and panicked. It's not kidnapping if they're my kids. It is when you're violating custody arrangements. The police know, Sandra. If you try to leave Ohio with those children, you'll be arrested. You can't do this. You can't take my babies from me. I didn't take them. You lost them when you decided your affair was more important than your family. Sandra's voice turned venomous. Where's Bradley? I need to talk to Bradley. He'll help me. Bradley's being arrested right now, in Mexico City. The FBI has him. He's going to prison for 20 years. You're lying. I'm not. Jennifer Thornton called me. She's been cooperating with the FBI for months. Bradley's Ponzi scheme is over, and so is your affair. Sandra made a choking sound. Jennifer knows everything. About the affair. About the money. She's the one who gave the FBI the evidence to arrest Bradley. She played him, Sandra, just like he played you. No, that's not. Bradley loves me. He said he lied, just like you lied to David, and now you both have to face the consequences. Sandra hung up on me. I immediately called Frank back. She's going to run. I know. Angela's still on her. Sandra just pulled into a gas station. She's filling up the tank. She's preparing for a long drive. Where are the kids? Still at your house with David. They're safe. Thank God. But 30 minutes later, everything went wrong. David called me, his voice pure panic. Mom, Sandra's here. She just pulled up to the house. What? That's impossible. She's supposed to be. She's here. She's banging on the door. She's screaming that she wants her kids. My blood ran cold. Don't open the door. Call 911. Now. She's crying, Mom. She's saying she just wants to hug them goodbye. David, no, it's a trick. Don't. I heard it in the background, the sound of the door opening. Emma's voice, bright and innocent. Mommy? No, I shouted into the phone. David, don't let her. The line went dead. I was already in my car, already driving. I called 911 while speeding toward my house. This is Jessica Matthews. My daughter-in-law is violating a restraining order. She's at my address attempting to take my grandchildren. Send police immediately. I gave them my address, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Then I called Frank. Sandra's at my house. She's with David and the kids. Tracking her now. Yeah, she's at your address. Police are on the way. ETA 3 minutes. That's too long. She could be gone by then. Jessica, you're still 15 minutes out. There's nothing you can do except trust David. But I knew my son. David was kind, soft-hearted. If Sandra begged him, if she cried and said she just wanted to say goodbye to the kids, he might give her 5 minutes. And 5 minutes was all she needed. I was still 10 minutes from my house when Frank called back. Jessica, Sandra just left your address. She has the kids in her car. What? Police are in pursuit. She's heading west on I-74. I listened to Frank's play-by-play, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. She's driving erratically, running red lights. Police are trying to set up a roadblock at the Coleraine exit. Don't lose her, Frank. Air unit has visual. 2 juveniles visible in the back seat. Emma and Michael, my babies, in a car with their unstable mother driving like a maniac. Ground unit setting up roadblock. Sandra's taking the exit now. Then I heard it through Frank's phone. The squeal of tires. A loud crash. Screaming. Vehicle collision at the roadblock. Suspect vehicle has stopped. Officers approaching. Kids appear uninjured. Suspect is she's running on foot. More shouting. More chaos. Suspect in custody. Repeat. Suspect in custody. I pulled over on the side of the highway, my whole body shaking. The kids. Safe. Shaken up but not hurt. David's on his way to the scene now. I sat in my car and cried. Not tears of relief. Tears of rage. Sandra had almost gotten away with it. She'd almost taken Emma and Michael and disappeared forever. I met David at the police station. He was holding Emma and Michael so tight I wasn't sure he'd ever let them go. Emma was crying. Mommy said we were going on an adventure, but then she was crying and the car went boom and I was scared. Michael's face was buried in David's shoulder. He wasn't talking. It's okay, David kept saying. It's okay. You're safe now. I knelt down to Emma's level. Sweetheart, Mommy made a very bad choice. She's going to have to go away for a while. Is Mommy going to jail? Emma asked. David and I looked at each other. Yes, David said quietly. Mommy is going to jail. Emma started crying harder. But who's going to take care of her? And that question broke my heart. Because even after everything, Emma still loved her mother. A police officer approached us. Mr. Matthews, your wife is being charged with attempted kidnapping, child endangerment, fleeing from police, and violation of a restraining order. She'll be arraigned tomorrow morning. David nodded numbly. There's something else, the officer said. She's asking to see the children. She wants to say goodbye. Absolutely not, I said immediately, but Emma looked up. I want to see Mommy. Emma, that's not a good idea right now, David said, but she's sad. I heard her crying. Emma's little face was so earnest. Please, Daddy, just for a minute. David looked at me helplessly. 1 minute, I said. Supervised, through glass, no physical contact. The officer led us to a visitation room. Sandra sat on the other side of bulletproof glass wearing an orange jumpsuit. Her eyes were red and swollen. When she saw Emma and Michael, she started crying again. Emma pressed her hand against the glass. Mommy, don't cry. Sandra put her hand on the other side, matching Emma's. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Why did you drive so fast? You scared me. I know. I was scared too. I made a bad choice. Sandra looked at David. I made a lot of bad choices. Michael finally looked up from David's shoulder. Mommy, are you coming home? Sandra shook her head. No, sweetie. Mommy has to stay here for a while. How long? Sandra's face crumpled. She looked at David. How long? A long time, David said quietly. The officer touched my shoulder. Time's up. As we led the kids away, Emma looked back. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby girl. I love you both so much. Sandra's sobs followed us down the hallway. Monday morning, the custody hearing. Judge Rodriguez's courtroom was packed. David and I sat on one side with Patricia. Sandra sat on the other with a public defender. She couldn't afford Daniel Harper anymore. Sandra looked terrible. 5 days in jail had taken its toll. No makeup. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The orange jumpsuit made her look small and vulnerable. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Rodriguez entered and took her seat. She looked at Sandra with an expression I couldn't read. Mrs. Matthews, you've been charged with multiple crimes, including attempted parental kidnapping. How do you plead? Sandra stood. Guilty, Your Honor. A murmur went through the courtroom. You understand that this plea will affect your custody rights? Yes, Your Honor. Then let's proceed. Judge Rodriguez looked at Patricia. Ms. Mendez, present your case for sole custody. Patricia stood and laid out everything. The affair, the stolen money, the plane tickets, the attempted kidnapping. She had photographs, bank statements, emails, a mountain of evidence. Your Honor, Sandra Matthews has proven herself to be deceptive, manipulative, and dangerous. She systematically looted marital assets. She conducted an 18-month affair. She planned to flee the country with the minor children. And when that plan failed, she violated a restraining order and attempted to kidnap them anyway. She crashed her vehicle while fleeing from police with both children in the car. Judge Rodriguez turned to Sandra. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Sandra's public defender stood. Your Honor, my client would like to address the court. Proceed. Sandra stood, her hands shaking. Your Honor, I know I did terrible things. I'm not trying to excuse them, but I need to explain why. Go ahead. 2 years ago, I had a miscarriage. Sandra's voice cracked. I was 12 weeks pregnant. David was away on business. I called him terrified, bleeding. I needed him. And he told me he couldn't come home, that his presentation was too important. That's not true. David stood up. I flew home that same day. Order. Judge Rodriguez slammed her gavel. Mr. Matthews, sit down. David sat, his face red. Sandra continued. I lost the baby alone, in our bathroom, while our daughter watched TV in the next room. And something broke inside me that day, something I don't think ever healed. Mrs. Matthews, the judge said, are you claiming this justifies your actions? No, Your Honor, but it explains them. After the miscarriage, I felt invisible, like David didn't see me anymore, didn't care. He went right back to work. 70-hour weeks, business trips, and I was alone with my grief and 2 small children and a marriage that felt dead. I watched David's face. He was crying silently. When I met Bradley, he paid attention to me. He listened. He made me feel seen again. Sandra wiped her eyes. I know now that he was using me, that he manipulated me. But at the time, I thought he loved me. And I was so desperate to feel loved that I convinced myself the affair was okay, that stealing the money was okay, that everything I did was justified because I was so unhappy. And the attempted kidnapping, Judge Rodriguez asked. I panicked. When I realized David knew everything, when I saw that I was losing my children, I panicked. I thought if I could just get them away, we could start over. Just the 3 of us. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't thinking at all. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Matthews, I want to show you something. She nodded to her clerk, who set up a laptop. On the screen appeared phone records. These are your husband's phone records from the day of your miscarriage. March 4th, 2024. At 11:17 a.m., you called him. The call lasted 3 minutes. At 11:45 a.m., he booked a flight from Boston to Columbus. At 12:30 p.m., he boarded that flight. At 2:47 p.m., he arrived at the hospital where you'd been taken. He was with you by 3 p.m. Sandra stared at the screen. Your husband did not abandon you, Mrs. Matthews. He came home immediately. He was with you through the entire ordeal. Your memory of that day is factually incorrect. But I remember... Sandra's face was confused, lost. I remember being alone. Trauma can distort memory, the judge said, especially when we're looking for someone to blame for our pain. You needed your husband to be the villain in your story, so your brain rewrote history to make him one. Patricia stood. Your Honor, we have testimony from Dr. Wilson, Mrs. Matthews' therapist. Dr. Wilson diagnosed Sandra with complicated grief following the miscarriage, along with depression and anxiety. She notes that Sandra has a pattern of distorting memories to fit narratives where she's the victim. Is Dr. Wilson present? Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Wilson took the stand. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. Dr. Wilson, in your professional opinion, is Sandra Matthews mentally fit to have custody of her children? Not currently, Your Honor. Sandra has untreated trauma depression and a tendency towards self-destructive behavior. She needs intensive therapy before she should have unsupervised contact with anyone, let alone children. Could she become fit with treatment? Possibly. With proper medication, regular therapy, and time to process her trauma. Yes, I believe Sandra could eventually be a healthy parent again. But that's going to take years, not months. Judge Rodriguez looked at Sandra. Do you understand what Dr. Wilson is saying? Sandra nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm not well. I know that now. I need help. Yes, you do. The judge closed the file in front of her. Here is my ruling. David Matthews is granted sole physical and legal custody of the minor children, Emma and Michael Matthews. Sandra Matthews will have supervised visitation once per month for 2 hours with a court-appointed supervisor present. This arrangement will be reviewed in 1 year, contingent on Sandra completing a mental health treatment program and maintaining employment. Sandra's shoulders shook with sobs. Additionally, Mrs. Matthews will serve 18 months in prison for the kidnapping attempt, followed by 3 years of probation. Upon release, she is required to attend therapy twice weekly and maintain regular employment. She is also ordered to repay David Matthews the sum of $150,000 over the next 10 years. The judge looked at both of them. I want to say something to both of you. This marriage is over. These children are going to grow up in a broken home. That's tragic. But it doesn't have to be devastating. Mr. Matthews, your children need their mother, even if she can only be present in a limited capacity. Don't poison them against her. Mrs. Matthews, your children need you to be healthy more than they need you to be present. Do the work. Get better. Show them that even when we make terrible mistakes, we can choose to do better. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. Summer had come to Ohio. The trees were full and green. The lake sparkled in the sunshine. I stood on the dock at the lake house, watching David teach Emma how to cast a fishing rod. Michael was building a sandcastle near the shore, completely absorbed in his work. Like this, Daddy? Emma asked, swinging the rod. Perfect, sweetheart. Now just wait. The fish will come. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the investigation, the trial, the aftermath. Bradley Thornton had been extradited from Mexico. He was awaiting trial on federal fraud charges. Jennifer had gotten everything the house full custody of their children a fresh start. She'd sent me a Christmas card last month with a photo of her kids. They looked happy. Sandra was in prison. David took the kids to see her once a month as ordered by the court. Emma always came back quiet and sad. Michael didn't really understand where Mommy had gone or why, but they were healing. Slowly, with therapy and love and the stability of David and me providing a safe home. Grandma, Michael ran up to me. Look what I made. It was a sandcastle complete with a moat and a tower. That's beautiful, sweetheart. It's for Mommy, so she has a castle when she comes home. My heart broke a little. That's very thoughtful of you. David walked over, putting his arm around my shoulders. Thanks, Mom, for everything. I don't think I ever properly thanked you. You don't need to thank me. That's what mothers do. Still, you saved us. You saved the kids. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. What mistake? Staying blind. If you hadn't found out about Sandra, if you hadn't investigated, if you hadn't built that case, I might have stayed with her. I might have kept living that lie. And one day I would have come home and Emma and Michael would have been gone. I squeezed his hand. But they're not gone. They're right here, safe. We stood there together watching the kids play. Behind us, the lake house stood solid and strong, still standing after 40 years, still a sanctuary. Mom, David said quietly, I'm seeing someone. Her name is Rachel. She's a teacher at Emma's school. That's wonderful, sweetheart. It's early, really early, but she's kind and patient, and she understands about the kids and the situation. I wanted you to know. I'm happy for you, David. You deserve to be happy. Emma caught a fish, a small one, but she was ecstatic. David rushed over to help her reel it in. Michael abandoned his sandcastle to sea. I watched my family, smaller now, scarred but healing, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The lake house had seen tragedy. It had been the site of betrayal and discovery and pain. But it was still standing, still ours, still a place where we could build new memories, better memories. Sandra had tried to destroy us, but she'd failed. We were still here, still together, still a family, and that was enough.